Small mom and pop landlords are still suffering as on time collection rates are at the lowest level in more than a year and a half. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that small mom and pop landlords are still not collecting their rent on time at the levels they were before the pandemic. Okay, even though these eviction moratoriums have ended, guess what? The small mom and pop landlords are the ones who suffered the most throughout the entire thing with, not being able to collect their rent, with not being able to evict the tenants who weren't paying, and not getting the rental assistance that they needed. And guess what? All these problems are still ongoing. And that's why I keep bringing these topics up. That's why I keep reading these articles, because I want to keep this topic on everyone's mind, okay? Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know if you are a small mom and pop landlord and you still are having trouble collecting your rent on time from these tenants, okay? I know a lot of landlords are in states where, hey, there is no eviction moratorium going on, but that doesn't mean that things have gotten easier for you. Okay, with all the inflation and everything going on, guess what? The tenants still are having difficulty paying, all right? So, this article comes from globestreet.com, and it says, on-time collection rates dropping for mom and pop multifamily landlords. And let's see what the article says. A new report is offering real-time glimpses into how well non-institutional landlords are collecting monthly rental payments as the pandemic wears on. And the data reveals that on-time collection rates among independent landlords have now dropped for 4 consecutive months. On-time payments are at their lowest rate since February 2021, and some deterioration could still lay ahead. The Independent Landlord Rental Performance Report by Chandon Economics and RentReady is unique in as much as it tracks a segment of landlords that are underrepresented in leading market samples. In comparison, the National Multifamily Housing Council's Rent Tracker has a massive sample size of more than 11 million, but exclusively represents the professionally managed segment of the rental housing sector. And it is hard to track the data for a lot of small mom and pop landlords because, the accounting and the paperwork just aren't done as well as these big corporate landlords are. Now, for me personally, for my 8 units that I own down in Kansas City, I do have professional property management that operates it. But this isn't, the same type of property management that will operate a 400 unit apartment complex, but I do have good accounting, good management, good, coverage of expenses. I mean, it's easier for me to track that than it is for the small owner who may own, just 1 or 2 small unit. Like imagine if you just own a couple of duplexes, okay? And you're doing all the management yourself and you keep all of your accounting on a nice Excel spreadsheet. Well, that's hard to convey to what's happening going on. Like they can't read what you're doing nationally, and be like, oh yeah, Bob down here with his 2 duplexes is having trouble collecting his rents on time. No, they just don't see it. So basically what the article is saying is that a lot of the things that are happening to small landlords, it just isn't seen through the statistics that they usually cover nationally. Data from mid-November to December shows signs of both hope and concern, the report notes, as the non-performance rate, which includes both late and unpaid rental charges, ticked up 18 basis points. Meanwhile, on-time collection rates dipped slightly to 78.1%. The full collection rate for November rents is at 85.2%, though this share should continue to rise as some unpaid units will eventually transition to paid late, the report predicts. And December's preliminary on-time collection rate estimate dropped by 49 BPS month over month to 77.6%, the lowest rate since February. I can tell you for a fact that I had at least one tenant who paid me late in the month of December, and she was starting a brand new job, and I just said, hey, listen, it's Christmas time. I'm going to waive my late fee for this month. As long as you pay me before the end of the month, we're cool. And she did, and I got my check. Everything was cool. But on time collection for that month is, it's just not It's not happening. So, for now, all I can say is, I understand where they're getting this data from and why they're saying this. Independently managed single-family rentals, driven by millennials jostling for more space, have outperformed the broader market in recent months, despite entering the pandemic with the lowest on-time payment rates of the property types tracked by the report. SFRs also beat the next best performing property type, 2 to 4 family, by 82 BPS, though the latter is the only residential property type to see on-time collection rates rise in December, improving by 45 BPS to 77.5%. So yeah, like I said, my rental where I had the tenant paying late, it's a single family rental, and I will say that my single family rentals, they do perform better in terms of my tenants paying late than my 8 units down in Kansas City. My 8 units are actually 4 duplexes, but they're all right next to each other, so it kind of operates as a single 8 unit property. But those 4 duplexes, if you count it in the 2 to 4 unit category, the tenants in there are more likely to pay me late than my single family home. So I also agree with what they're saying here in this paragraph. The worst property type for on-time collections was small multifamily properties operated by independent landlords with a 1-month change of 100 BPS and the lowest on-time payment rate, 76.5%, of the 3 tracked property types. More than 15% of small multifamily units have still yet to pay their rent as of November, the last month for which data is available. Yeah, 76.5%. That's how much small multifamily renters actually pay their rent on time. That's pretty sad. Now, I invest mostly in small multifamily, okay? I've owned duplexes, I've owned fourplexes, I've never owned a commercial building or a 5+ unit property. And I will say, though, that, yeah, I agree with this. Now, the thing is, the majority of these small multifamily properties, they are owned by small landlords such as myself. They're not owned by these institutional investors. So, obviously, the bigger the investor is, the less they want to have to deal with the headaches of these little small properties. So, now we've got the institutional investors who are going more into the single family rentals as well, because they saw that, hey, the tenants, once they're in these single family homes, they stay in them a lot longer than they would in apartments, especially small apartment units. So, looking at what a small landlord or a small, wannabe real estate investor can do to get themselves into the market, look at these 2 to 4 unit properties, okay? So the big investors don't want to mess with them. They want to deal with single families, or they want to deal with the really big properties. And the small investors, the ones who just own 1 or 2 properties, they don't want to deal with them either. The homeowners, most people, they don't want to own a property and live in it with their tenants. So, you're not competing with homeowners. So when you're dealing in the 2 to 4 unit range, you're only dealing with other small landlords a lot of the time. Maybe you'll get a small landlord, and that might be a guy who owns a couple hundred units, but not the really big investment funds and institutional investors. They're not going to be the ones who are competing with you to buy these properties, because they are a lot more of a headache. But the reason why the payment rate is lower is because, hey, guess what? These 2 to 4 unit properties are the ones that are going to be owned by the small mom and pop landlords, and they oftentimes are the lower income housing. They're the affordable housing that a lot of these cities have in them. So what I've seen, at least around here, is that there has been almost no new development of 2 to 4 unit properties anywhere in the areas that I invest. I mean, I don't know if this is true for, like all throughout the country, but, the big developers are building huge apartment complexes or single family homes. They're not building 2 to 4 unit properties anymore. So, it becomes a lot more difficult for you to find anything except for very old, properties that were built. But, interesting article here. I'm kind of going off into a tangent. I'm talking about my investing style, but, it really is interesting here when you start really diving into the statistics and you see that, the collection rates for these are not so good. But I think that what that means is that there is an opportunity to go in there, put in place great management, and really have something that gives you excellent cash flow and not have to compete with a whole bunch of other investors or homeowners or whatever. So yeah, great article.